overview of how to get set up and ready for Code Louisville. We're going to show you how to set up your environment on your laptop. And what that means is we're going to show you how to get set up to be a real developer, how to get ready to program, and do everything you'll need to do as a developer on your laptop. Don't worry if you don't catch everything here. It'll be covered in class, but this will be a great video to help you hit the ground running. That way you can ask questions on your very first day. So the first thing I want to show you is let's come to Treehouse. You've all seen this before since you've started on your Treehouse lessons. This is Treehouse's built-in editor called Workspaces. So this is an editor directly in the browser. And this is a great editor for working with Treehouse and getting started learning, but this is honestly not what real developers use. Real developers use an editor that is located on their computer, not in their browser. So while this is great, let's go ahead and get in the habit of moving away from this. So that's the first thing you're going to get shown in this video. When it comes to editors, there's a couple different options. The one that I'm going to recommend today is Visual Studio Code. You can just search Visual Studio Code on the internet and you'll find this webpage. Notice that if you're coming across something that says Visual Studio Community Edition, that's not what you want. You want Visual Studio Code. And the URL is code.visualstudio.com. This is a very popular, very stable, great editor. That is available both on Mac and Windows, even available on Linux. It's available on every platform. But this is a professional editor, free to use, open source, but you can't go wrong with this editor. There are a couple other options. One of the other big options is Atom. The URL is even easier. It's atom.io. This is another fantastic professional editor, and you could not go wrong with this. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to be showing you everything with Visual Studio Code. So you can go ahead and download Visual Studio Code, which I've already done, and I'll actually just show you what it looks like when I pull it over. So this is Visual Studio Code. You can launch Visual Studio Code by hitting Command Space, or you can click on the hourglass, the magnifying glass up here in the top right-hand corner and typing code, and you'll see Visual Studio Code will show up. Don't worry if your Visual Studio Code looks different. You can apply themes and all sorts of other fun stuff to it, which is why mine will probably look different from yours. But don't worry, it's still going to work the exact same. So I'm going to pull this off to the side for now. And you have both code.visualstudio.com and atom.io. Go ahead and get in the habit of using these professional editors. It's going to save you a lot of time in the future, and it's going to set you on the right track to becoming a professional developer. Now that you have your editor sorted out, the next thing we want to talk about is GitHub. GitHub is where you'll store all of your code as your developer. Think of it as your central location or backup for your code. We're not going to go too much into how to use GitHub now, but I want to show you what the site is, how to get signed up, and how to find Code Louisville's page on GitHub. So we'll come to GitHub. It's loading right now, and I am already logged in. When you're first come to GitHub, you'll be introduced with a button that says Sign Up. If you already have a GitHub account, go ahead and just sign in. If not, go ahead and go through the sign up process. One thing to note is you'll want to make sure your GitHub name is something you're not afraid to show people in the future. So this is where from now on other developers will find you, they'll see your work, companies will come here to look at what you've programmed. You'll want this to be something that you're not afraid to show people in the future. So it's best that you try to stick as close to your actual name as possible when you're signing up for your username on your GitHub account. Once you've signed up, you'll be introduced with this page, and the more people you follow and the more stuff you do, the more activity you'll see here on the front page. But you don't worry if yours is empty for now. So what we want to do is come up to the search bar and just type in Code Louisville. And then come down here to users on the left, and we'll see the first user is the Code Louisville user. You'll know it because it's got the Code Louisville logo. This is Code Louisville's page where they store different projects. So you can see here where it says repositories 27. That's basically saying there's 27 projects, we'll call them repositories from now on, that Code Louisville as an organization has stored on GitHub. These are all open source and you can view them because they're all public. So you'll notice a couple right off the top, codelouisville.org, which is the code for the Code Louisville website. But if you look 3 down, and this might change in the future depending on when you watch this video, there's one called front-end template. If you're not seeing it, just search for it here in the search repositories box. This template is going to be your starting point for everything you'll do in the front-end web development class. And I promise you're going to enjoy using this template over not having one. So we'll click into this template right here, and you're going to see lots of confusing stuff right off the top. The first thing you'll note is a Readme is what we'll call it. This is where you can, well, the developer, the creator of this repository, has left information for you, the viewer of this repository. That Readme, though, is an example Readme, and that'll make more sense in the future. But when you first come to repository, always check the Readme. Here in the middle, we see all of the files in this project. So we see we have a folder for CSS, a folder for images, and a folder for JavaScript, along with some best practices, the README, and your index.html. This is your main HTML file. So when you're starting projects in this class and working on things, this is the template that you'll want to use. So I'm going to show you how to get this template on your computer. So there's a green button right here called clone or download. Cloning is a much more powerful feature that your instructors will cover with you in class. So for now, I don't want to dive into that, or we might be here all day. So what we're going to do is hit download zip. And you can see it started downloading here. Once it's downloaded, we'll click on that. And this opened it up, and it went ahead and extracted it for us in our downloads folder. Let's change our view here. So you can see front-end template, and then if you notice, it has all of the same files. Let me open Finder back up. It has all of the same files that you see in here. Best practices, CSS, image, index.html. We just downloaded this project right here. So the first thing you want to do when you download this template is let's not leave it in our downloads folder. I think that's a bad idea. So I'm going to right click and then copy, or if power user, go ahead and use the keyboard shortcuts as you should get used to using, but those you can't see on a video. We're going to come over here to my development folder. It's always best to make a development folder where you can store all of your projects. And then I've got a folder called Code Louisville. We're going to paste this right in here. So now that we've got this saved in here, we're ready to get started. So we're not going to go over too much code, but I want to show you how to get this open in Visual Studio Code. So we've opened Visual Studio Code. I'm going to drag it back onto the page. So we've got these next to each other. For Visual Studio Code, I'm going to hit File, and then I think I can, we'll just do this. We'll click this Open Folder button right here, because we want to open this folder up. And we'll click on the Code Louisville folder in the front-end template master. So we'll click on this. And that opened this up right in Visual Studio Code. So this will be very similar to the workspaces that Treehouse has. On the left, we've got our file tree. This shows us all of the files and folders in our project. And right here is where our editor will be, on the right. So you can see when I click on the index.html, we can see all of my code and everything for that. Let me go ahead and center this up in the screen. When I click on best practices, we'll be able to see all of this. This is a great file for you. One of the other mentors has gone through and created this project, and they've left you some best practices. So you can go through and read this and see, oh, here's what my file name should be. Here's what my index.html is. Here's what my CSS folder is. And you'll notice some extra markings here. That's because it's in a language called markup. If you'd like to read it without that, you can come over here and just click on bestpractices.md. And you'll be able to read it without all that extra stuff, as we'll call it. So you'll see here we have a CSS folder with nothing in that file, an image folder with nothing in there, and a JavaScript folder with nothing in there. Or no, there's an app.js which has nothing in it. So this is the project that you'll be using when you start off and you get going. Don't worry too much about how to use this or how to write any code in here. You can go in here and play around and get started and get working. But don't worry about that now. You'll learn about that in your first couple of weeks in class. But when you're working on Treehouse, maybe try to go ahead and get started using this editor, this template, if you're feeling ambitious. But definitely get the editor installed and definitely get the template downloaded and just kind of poke around. It'll save you a lot of time in the future, and you'll be ready to ask questions. So once again, you can find that here. Go to github.com, sign up for an account, name it something you won't be afraid to show in a future employer, friends, other developers, just anybody. In the search bar, search for Code Louisville, and then after you find Code Louisville, navigate to the front end template. If you got lost at any point, feel free to back up and watch that again, because it's super important that you know how to get to Code Louisville's GitHub page and get this project opened up. If you can't figure it out, feel free to drop anybody a line on Slack. There's general channels, there's everything on Slack. Get on there, get signed up, and ask questions. We're there to help. So now that we know how to download that template, there's one other major thing that we need to get set up as a developer, and it's your terminal. And you may have been on the internet before looking how to figure out and solve a problem, and they're like, copy and paste this scary thing into this other scary thing. And one of those scary things is the terminal. So we can open that by command space or hourglass in the top right-hand corner, and then type in terminal. So I've already got mine open. I'm just going to drag it over across the screen right here. And here's the terminal. I'll make it bigger. So here's our terminal. Don't worry if yours looks different. Like I said, this is one of those things where you can apply themes to it, totally change it and make it look totally different. So this is just one example of what a terminal might look like. Or for my day-to-day terminal, here's what my terminal might look like. Bit cleaner, bit easier to see. And there's a couple different options. So for Mac users, this terminal right here is built in to your operating system, which is fantastic. But there are a couple other options besides the built-in terminal, and I would recommend downloading one of the other options. One of the first options, or we can leave that open, I'll just drag it over here, is if you search for Hyperterminal, it'll show up. It's on the website hyper.is, hyper is. And this is a fantastic terminal. It's actually the one I just showed you a minute ago, but I really recommend it. So we can scroll down and we can view all of the platforms once the website loads. Other platform. Oh, scrolled down too far, didn't I? So this is available for Mac OS, Windows, and all versions of Linux. So it'll run on Debian, Fedora, or basically all other distros. But this is definitely available for Mac users, and I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic terminal. The other terminal, which tried, true, and tested, and if you have a slower machine, the next terminal I'm going to show you may be the better option for you, as it's just a bit more efficient, is iTerm2. So we'll Google that while that's Googling. Again, it's iTerm2, and you can find it at iterm2.com. And while the website's not as pretty, the terminal is still fantastic. So you can come over here to downloads, and you can download this terminal and get started. Go ahead and click that right there, and I can open that up. And here's iTerm2. I'll go ahead and open that up. So here is iTerm2 right here. It's a bit hard to see on that black over black. I'll move it up here. And iTerm2 is an absolutely fantastic terminal, and I recommend it. There's no issues with iTerm2 at all. But I do recommend that you get away from the built-in terminal, so either go to iTerm2 at iterm2.com or Hyper, and you can go to that at hyper.is, hyper.is. And those are great terminals. I really recommend using them. They'll make your life a lot easier. But if you don't want to download those, it is perfectly fine to use the built-in terminal right here. It's just going to be a bit harder. So if you know any terminal commands, let's pull over Hyperterm right here. You can do simple stuff like list and CD into folders and all sorts of fun stuff. But we'll be talking more about that in class, so don't worry about that too much right now. But go ahead, get your terminal installed, get it set up, and get everything running. One command you will want to type into your terminal, just to make sure that everything is running correctly, is we want to make sure we have Git installed. You'll notice the similarity, Git and GitHub. Git is a command line utility. This is the command line we're looking at right here that allows us to interface with GitHub And you'll want to make sure you have this installed. OS X users, Mac users, you'll have this installed by default, but let's just check to make sure. So you can type git space dash dash version, version, and hit enter. And notice mine returned git version 2.15.1. If yours doesn't say anything at all, go ahead and reach out to us on Slack and we can get that sorted out. If yours says git version and then has a different version, that's totally fine. Don't worry about it. You're ready to go. But yes, once again, if you type git version, git space dash dash version, and you see nothing at all or you get an error message, go ahead and contact us on Slack, reach out in the general channel or the GitHub channel, or just reach out to anybody, and we'll help you get that solved. But for Mac users, there should be no problem. Git should just be installed by default. So we covered intro. Let's get away from the built-in workspaces editor into Treehouse. And then let's go to a real editor such as Hyper or Atom. There's a couple more, Brackets or Sublime. But VS Code and Atom are great editors. Reach out, do some Googling, figure out which one you like the best, try them all out. They're all great. You can't really go wrong. But let's get on to a professional editor. The next thing is we talked about GitHub. Get on there, set up an account, make it something you won't be afraid for people to see in the future. Get Code Louisville's page, get on there, find it, follow it so it's easy to get to, and find that starter project called Front End Template. Download that, open it up in your editor, VS Code, Atom, Brackets, just file open, or if there's an open folder button, grab that. Just get that folder open. Then after we set up that, we talked about terminals. There's the built-in terminal. You can hit Command Space to open up your app launcher and type in terminal and you can get to it. Or you can install some like iTerm, or you can install Hyper. It's best to go ahead and install iTerm or Hyper. Those will save you a lot of pain in the future. Those are what professional developers are using. You'll be happy you did it. And you can't go wrong with either or. What I will say is if you have a slower machine, maybe consider using iTerm 2. It'll run just a bit better on your machine than Hyper, but if you've got a faster, newer machine, go ahead and download Hyper or iTerm 2. Try them both out, see which one you like best. My personal preference is Hyper, but downloading iTerm 2 again, it makes me kind of want to switch back. And as a developer, you'll find that you're always switching tools, just having fun. So you can't go wrong with either one, but go ahead and get those set up. Lastly, like I keep saying, if you have any problems at all, get on Slack, send us a message. Your mentors are there to help, and I promise you're not bugging them. They will love that you send them a message or you post in channels asking for help. That's what we're there for. That's why mentors have signed up to volunteer. So good luck, and we'll see all of you in class.